The door to Sable Pennick's laundry hit the wall hard enough to crack the glass pane and rattle the washboards on their hooks. The man in the doorframe looked like the territory had chewed him up, swallowed him, and spit him back wrong. Trail dust ground into every seam of his clothes, a gash bleeding above his right eye, and hands that shook the way hands shake when a man hasn't slept in 3 days and the thing keeping him awake is bigger than fear. Cade Hollister. Sable knew the name before he opened his mouth. Everybody in Vale Creek knew what Cade Hollister had done during the Range War, the homesteads he helped torch, the families he helped scatter like sparks off a burning roof. His own brother had disowned him for it. Now that brother was dead. And Cade Hollister was standing in her laundry, smelling like horse sweat and desperation, breathing like a man who'd just run clean out of road. Before you find out what question she asked that turned this cowboy's whole life inside out, drop a comment right now. Where are you watching from, and what time is it? Subscribe, and let's ride into this one together. I need a wife by tomorrow morning. He said it flat, the way men confess to things they already know they can't undo. The two women collecting their husbands' shirts froze mid-reach, clutched their parcels to their chests, and shuffled toward the door without looking back. Sable didn't move. She kept her hand on the pressing iron, 3 pounds of scorching metal that could crack a man's cheekbone, and studied him the way she studied stains. Where did the damage start? How deep did it set? Could anything be done? Magistrate Polk says I can't take custody of my brother's girl unless I'm married. Cade continued, his voice raw as rope burn. She's on the 10 o'clock train from Cheyenne tomorrow. 6 years old. Name's Lark. If I don't have a wife beside me on that platform when the train stops, she goes to an orphanage in Sacramento. I'll never see her again. Sable should have told him to leave. Every smart bone in her body screamed it. Cade Hollister was trouble-stitched into boot leather, the kind that left scorch marks on everything it touched and everyone who stood too close. But Sable Pennick had stopped choosing safe 3 years ago, on a cold night in St. Louis when she'd packed a bag and walked out the front door while her 3-year-old daughter slept upstairs. She'd made it 6 blocks before the guilt hit like a freight wagon. She turned around, came back, found her daughter still sleeping, still safe, still breathing those tiny breaths that sound like promises. But her husband had watched her leave from the upstairs window. And after he died of pneumonia the following winter, his parents used that one walk, those 6 blocks, to take mercy away forever. A judge had looked at Sable and said, "A woman who walks away from her child is unfit to keep one." She'd come west to disappear, opened a laundry because clean things were the only kind she trusted anymore. "What did you do to lose her?" The question left Sable's mouth before she could stop it. Cade's whole body flinched like she'd touched a branding iron to bare skin. "I never had her. My brother Josiah cut me off after the Range War. Wouldn't let me near his wife or child. I've never met my own niece, never held her, never heard her laugh." His throat worked like he was trying to swallow a stone. "But he named me in his will. I don't understand why. Maybe he forgave me at the end. Maybe he just had nobody else left." Sable's fingers found the locket at her throat, a curl of copper hair sealed behind glass. She knew exactly what it meant to have a child kept from you. Knew it like a burn victim knows fire. From inside the scar, not from across the room. "How much is Magistrate Polk involved in this?" she asked. Cade's eyes sharpened. "Why?" "Because Ezra Polk doesn't lift a finger unless profit's attached. If he's deciding where a child lands, he wants something." Silence. Then Cade pulled a folded deed from his coat. "Josiah's ranch. 80 acres along the North Fork. If Lark ends up in Sacramento, Polk administers the property as her trustee. 12 years of free land." Sable set the iron down. It hissed against damp cloth like a rattlesnake's warning. A child, a ranch, a crooked magistrate. She should have bolted. Instead, she said, "I'll marry you tomorrow, Mr. Hollister, but understand me clearly. If I find out you're using that girl to save your brother's land, I'll hand her to Polk myself, and burn the deed on your porch steps. 3 years before he walked into that laundry, Cade Hollister had ridden with the Stockmen's Association when they burned out the homesteaders in the Powder River Valley. He told himself it was legal. Land claims, open range, protecting the cattle drives from sod-busters who'd fence the grass and kill the industry. That's what they all told themselves while the roofs caught fire and women screamed from porches with children clutched to their skirts. Cade never killed a soul directly, but he held torches. He lit hay. He rode alongside men who did worse, and he watched the sky glow orange and told himself it was justice. On the night they burned the Aldrich farm down to its foundation stones, he didn't know the woman screaming on the porch, begging them to stop, barefoot in her nightgown, was the mother of the girl his brother Josiah loved. Nettie Aldrich, Josiah's future wife, Lark's future mother. Josiah found out 2 weeks later. He rode to Cade's camp in the high country with a face like carved granite and said 6 words that ended everything between them. "You burned my family's home." Cade tried to explain. He didn't know. He hadn't recognized the name. The Aldrich homestead was just another mark on the list. But Josiah's eyes were already stone. "You're dead to me," he said. He meant it the way rivers mean it when they cut through rock. Slow, permanent, and deeper than any man could cross. 5 years bled away without a word between them. Cade drifted ranch to ranch, sleeping in bunkhouses that stank of old sweat, drinking whiskey on the nights the guilt climbed so high he couldn't see over it. Then the telegram came, forwarded through 3 territories before it caught him. Josiah, dead. Cattle stampede. His will named Cade as guardian of his daughter Lark. Why would a man who'd called his brother dead leave him the most precious thing he owned? Cade rode hard for Vale Creek looking for answers and found Magistrate Ezra Polk instead, a narrow man behind a wide desk, hands folded, smile thin as barbed wire. "A single man with your history cannot take custody of a child," Polk said, pleasant as poison. "The territory requires a proper household, 2 parents, a home, evidence of moral fitness." Cade had a bedroll, a horse named Copper, and a guilt that could crush stone. "Get married," Polk said, "or the child goes to my cousin Drusilla in Sacramento. She runs a perfectly adequate home for orphans." The way he said perfectly adequate, smooth, rehearsed, satisfied, raised every hair on the back of Cade's neck. Like a man describing a trap he'd already built. He spent 2 brutal days begging every unmarried woman in Vale Creek. The widow Chesney said no with pity in her voice. Harlan Briggs' sister slammed the door so hard the hinges bent. 11 women turned him away, some with fear, some with contempt, none willing to yoke themselves to the man who'd burned half the territory's homesteads during the war. By sundown on the 2nd day, Cade sat on the feed store steps staring at the train schedule nailed to the station board. 10 o'clock tomorrow, 18 hours. Then he noticed the lamp burning late in the laundry across the muddy street. Sable Pennick, the quiet woman who'd appeared in Vale Creek 2 years back, with no husband, no history, and no appetite for small talk. She was his last door, and she was the only one that didn't slam shut in his face. What nobody in Vale Creek knew, not the preacher, not the doctor, not the gossiping women at the mercantile, was that Sable Pennick had her own ghost riding on that morning train. Not Lark, but everything Lark stood for, a child pulled from its mother by men with gavels and bank accounts. 3 years earlier, a judge in Missouri had stared at Sable across a polished courtroom and declared her unfit over 6 blocks and 1 hour of weakness. Her dead husband's parents had money, a brick house, a lawyer who used the word abandonment like a hammer. Sable had a carpet bag and a locket with a copper curl inside. She lost her daughter Mercy on a Tuesday afternoon. She boarded a westbound train on Wednesday morning. And she hadn't stopped running since, until tonight, until a burned-out cowboy walked through her door and gave her a reason to stand still. The ceremony lasted 4 minutes. Reverend Calloway performed it at sunrise on the church steps because he refused to sanctify what he called a transaction beneath God's roof. Sable wore her grey work dress, pressed sharp at the collar, because she'd be damned if she looked defeated on the worst morning of her life. Cade had borrowed a clean shirt from the general store, still creased from the shelf, too tight across the shoulders, smelling of starch and someone else's life. They stood 3 feet apart and spoke vows without meeting each other's eyes, stiff words that dropped onto the empty street like stones into a well. No rings, no kiss. When it was finished, Calloway handed over the certificate and said, "May the Lord have mercy on whatever this is." Sable folded it into her apron pocket, fingers steady even if her pulse was running wild. "Let's go," she said. "That train won't wait." Magistrate Polk was already on the platform, dark suit pressed sharp as a blade, leather folder under his arm, a clerk beside him scribbling notes with a dull pencil. October wind snapped the station flag hard enough to pop. Polk studied the marriage certificate the way a banker reads a note he plans to call due early. "Temporary custody," he announced. "Pending a full home inspection in 30 days. I'll be examining living conditions, the stability of this marriage, and the fitness of both parties to raise a child." His eyes settled on Sable a beat too long. 30 days, Mrs. Hollister. I'd use them wisely." Before Cade could reply, the whistle split the cold morning air like a scream, and the 10:05 from Cheyenne came grinding into view, black smoke dragging behind it like a funeral veil. Lark Hollister stepped off the train like a ghost stepping into the wrong world. She was 6 and small for her age, a black morning dress hanging past her ankles, boots with the soles worn through to nothing, dark hair tangled from 2 days of travel. She held a single carpet bag in both fists, gripping it the way drowning people grip wreckage. But it was her eyes that stopped Sable's breath cold. Grey as river stone and old as hunger, the eyes of a child who had learned early and permanently that adults were things you endured, not things you trusted. A welfare escort passed papers to Polk and left without a word. Lark stood alone on the splintered platform boards and looked at Cade the way you look at a fist, waiting for the impact. "Lark." Cade dropped to one knee and his voice came out broken as rusted hinges. "I'm your Uncle Cade. Your daddy. I know who you are." Her voice was flat as a creek stone skipped once and sunk. "Mama told me everything. You burned her family's farm. You burned her mama's house while she stood on the porch screaming for you to stop." The platform turned to marble. Every person within earshot went rigid. Cade's face drained white as bleached bone. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing. The truth had stepped off a train in a 6-year-old's voice and shot him through the chest in front of the whole town. Sable let him drown for 3 full seconds. Then she stepped forward and crouched to Lark's level. "You're right," she said. "He did that, and you have every right to be furious. Now, when did you eat last?" Whatever Lark expected from the stranger kneeling before her, it wasn't agreement. She searched Sable's face the way wounded animals search a hand, looking for the trick. "Who are you?" "I'm Sable. I married your uncle this morning so you wouldn't get shipped to Sacramento." Dangerous honesty. It could have shattered everything. But something flickered behind those ancient eyes. Not trust, nothing that generous. Recognition. One damaged creature seeing another. "I don't like Sacramento," Lark whispered. "The lady there hurts us." Sable kept her voice level, but her blood ran cold. "Then let's get you somewhere else." She held out her hand. Lark didn't take it, but she followed. And as they walked toward the wagon, Sable saw what she'd been dreading. Bruises on both of Lark's wrists, half hidden under threadbare sleeves, shaped exactly like adult fingerprints. The Hollister Ranch sat in a valley where the creek split around a stand of cottonwoods going copper in the October wind. Josiah had built the house with his own hands. 2 rooms, a loft, a porch that faced the Bighorn Mountains like a prayer. Walking through the front door was like stepping into a dead man's last breath. His coat still hung on the peg by the door. Nettie's sewing basket sat beside the hearth, a half-finished quilt folded on top, the needle still threaded with blue yarn as if she'd just stepped outside and would be right back. Flour dust coated the kitchen shelf. A child's drawing, stick figures under a yellow sun, was tacked to the wall with a bent nail. The whole cabin smelled of pine and absence. Lark walked through without touching anything, climbed to the farthest corner of the loft, and sat with her carpet-bag pressed against the wall, watching them from above like a hawk that hadn't decided whether to land or fly. The first week was a siege of silence broken only by wind and the creak of floorboards. Lark ate what Sable cooked and slept with the carpet-bag hugged to her chest like armor. She spoke to Cade exactly 0 times, not with cruelty, not with anger, just with the terrible blankness of a child who'd decided adults weren't worth the risk of words. Sable watched everything. How Lark flinched when doors shut hard. How she checked the windows before lying down, every night, every window. How she ate fast, hunched over her plate, guarding the food with her forearms. These weren't the habits of a child who'd known safety. These were prison habits. Orphanage habits. On the 8th night, after Lark had fallen asleep, clutching the bag in the loft, Sable told Cade about the bruises, about what Lark had whispered on the platform. Mrs. Polk hurting children, locking them in cellars, 14 kids behind walls where no one checked. She watched Cade's face go dark as a storm line. "I'll kill her," he said, quiet as a drawn hammer. "No," Sable answered. "You'll prove it. There's a line between justice and prison, and Lark needs you on this side of it." 3 days later, a different reckoning came. Lark found Cade alone by the woodpile and spoke to him for the first time since the train platform. "What did it look like?" she asked. "When you burned my grandmother's house." Cade set the axe down. His hands were shaking. "There was smoke first," he said. "Then the roof caught. Your grandmother came out on the porch screaming for us to stop. She was barefoot. It was November." He looked at the ground. "I didn't stop." Lark's chin trembled. "Mama used to have nightmares about fire. She'd wake up screaming and I'd hold her hand until she could breathe again. Now I know what she was dreaming about." She walked away without waiting for a response. Cade stood by the woodpile for a long time, the axe at his feet, staring at nothing. That night, Sable found him sitting on the porch in the cold dark, his head in his hands. She brought coffee without being asked and sat beside him without speaking. The silence between them had changed somewhere in the past week. It wasn't the stiff silence of strangers anymore. It was the tired silence of 2 people carrying loads too heavy to describe and too important to set down. "She deserved better than me," Cade finally said. "Josiah should have picked anyone else. He picked you because you're the only one who'd fight for her. I burned her grandmother's home, Sable. I know, and you've been burning yourself down over it for 5 years. Maybe it's time to build something instead." He looked at her then. Really looked. Not past her, not through her, but at her. And something in his expression shifted the way ice shifts on a river just before the thaw. He didn't say anything, but he didn't look away either. And when Sable went inside, she felt his gaze follow her all the way to the door. The next morning, Sable found Josiah's Bible on the shelf, thick with dust, its leather spine cracked from years of handling. She opened it to Psalms, and a folded paper slid out between the pages like a secret that had been holding its breath. The letter was in Josiah's handwriting, dated 3 months before his death. It documented everything, Magistrate Polk, using his position to seize land from widows and orphans, funneling property through fraudulent guardianship claims, his cousin Drusilla's orphanage serving as the pipeline. 6 families, 12 children, 80,000 acres of stolen ground. Josiah had been building a case to destroy Polk, and then Josiah had died in a stampede that suddenly didn't feel like an accident. Sable looked at Cade across the kitchen table, the letter trembling in her fingers. "Your brother didn't leave Lark to you because he forgave you," she said slowly. "He left her to you because you're the only person ruthless enough to bring Ezra Polk down." For the first time since she'd known him, Cade Hollister smiled. It was not a kind smile, it was a declaration of war. Polk arrived on the 28th day with a clerk, a deputy, and a smile that showed teeth. The morning frost hadn't melted yet. It clung to the fence posts and the dead grass and the window panes like something watching and waiting. Polk walked through the cabin, opening drawers and peering into cupboards like a man inventorying property he already considered his. He checked the pantry, the woodpile, the well depth. He asked Lark questions in a voice slicked with false kindness. Was she eating well? Did Mr. Hollister ever raise his voice? Did Mrs. Hollister ever leave her alone? Lark answered in single words, her face blank as fresh paper. Then Polk turned to Sable, and the air in the room changed the way air changes before lightning strikes. Charged, dangerous, too still. "Mrs. Hollister," he said, pulling a document from his leather folder with the slowness of a man savoring a meal. "I sent inquiries about your background. A thorough magistrate protects the children in his jurisdiction." He cleared his throat. "Sable Pennock, formerly of St. Louis. Married to Robert Pennock, deceased 1880. 1 daughter, Mercy, aged 8. Custody permanently revoked by the Missouri courts after Mrs. Pennock was found to have abandoned her child." He let the word hang in the cold air like a body from a gallows. "You walked out on your own daughter," he continued, projecting to the room, to the deputy, to the record. "And now you expect this territory to trust you with someone else's?" Sable's hands trembled, not from shame, from a fury so deep it had no bottom. "I left for 1 hour," she said, and her voice cut the silence clean as a blade through linen. "I walked 6 blocks because my husband was cruel and I was drowning and I didn't know how to survive another night in that house. And then I turned around. I came back. I chose my daughter. And a court full of men who'd never been hit decided that 1 hour of weakness mattered more than 3 years of love." Polk opened his mouth to respond, but a different voice cut through first. "Is it true?" Lark stood at the window, her small frame rigid, her grey eyes locked on Sable. "You left your little girl?" The question hit harder than anything Polk could have thrown. This wasn't a magistrate's weapon. This was a child who had been left, asking a woman she was beginning to trust if she was the kind of person who leaves. Sable knelt. She looked Lark in the eyes and told the truth. "Yes, I walked out the door, and it was the worst moment of my life. Not because I left, but because I almost didn't come back. I was that broken, Lark, that scared. But I did come back, and they still took her from me." Lark stared at her for a long time. Then, "Do you miss her? Every single second of every single day?" The girl was quiet. Then she turned to Polk. "Mrs. Polk hit me 14 times in Sacramento. She locked me in a cellar with no light. Do you miss her too?" Polk's composure cracked. Before he could recover, Cade's voice came from the doorway. "Read this before you write another word." He held Josiah's letter like a lit fuse. Polk read it. Sable watched the blood drain from his face like water from a cracked jug. He left without signing a single document. But his eyes, as he climbed into his wagon, had changed. They were the eyes of a cornered animal, and cornered animals don't retreat. They attack. That night, after Lark had gone to bed, Sable sat by the fire and tried to stop shaking. The exposure of her past, dragged out in front of the child she was fighting to protect, had cracked something open that she'd spent 3 years sealing shut. Cade sat beside her and said 5 words she didn't expect. "You came back. That matters." The court didn't think so. The court was wrong. You walked out broken and you walked back stronger. That's not abandonment. That's survival. Sable looked at him. This man who'd held torches for rich men and hated himself for it, who couldn't sleep without checking on a girl who wouldn't speak to him, who carved wooden animals at night when he thought nobody was watching and left them on Lark's bed like unsigned letters. "You're not what I expected," she said quietly. "Better or worse?" "I haven't decided yet." But she had. She just wasn't ready to say it out loud. 3 nights later, Sable woke to the smell of kerosene. Not wood smoke, something sharper, chemical, painted across the dark with intent. She was moving before her brain caught up. "Cade!" He was already pulling on boots. The orange glow throbbing against the window panes told the whole story. The barn was on fire. Cade plunged into the dark, and Sable grabbed Lark from the loft, hauling her down the ladder while the girl clutched her carpet bag in one hand and Sable's neck with the other. They stumbled onto the porch and watched the barn fold inward with a sound like the world breaking its own ribs. Sparks spiraled into the black sky. The horse screamed from inside, a sound that would live in Sable's nightmares for years. Cade disappeared into the smoke. Lark pressed her face against Sable's chest, and Sable held her and prayed to hear hoofbeats instead of silence. He came back leading the horse and the milk cow, both staggering, eyes white with panic. His shirt had burned through at the shoulder. The skin beneath was raw and weeping. He collapsed, and Sable packed snow against the wound with steady hands while everything inside her shook apart. A kerosene tin sat 20 feet from the barn door, upright, deliberate, not hidden. A message. "I can reach you whenever I choose." Lark stood in the firelight, staring at the flames with an expression Sable recognized, not fear, but memory. The girl had heard her mother's nightmares about fire. Now she was living one. "Poke," Cade said through his teeth. Sable looked at the tin, at the burn on her husband's skin, at the 6-year-old watching another home go up in flames, and she felt something slam into place inside her chest like a bolt driven home. She was done running. She was done being afraid. She was done letting men with power decide what she was allowed to keep. At dawn, she rode to town alone. Past the deputy's office, he answered to Poke, straight to the territorial marshal's post at the end of Main Street. By providence or pure fury, Marshal Deacon Rudd was at his desk, a lean man with creek-bottom eyes and a reputation for patience that ran out the second someone lied to him. Sable placed Josiah's letter on the desk, described Lark's bruises, named Poke's 6 stolen families, and reported the arson. Rudd read the letter twice. "You're accusing a sitting magistrate of fraud, child abuse, arson, and potentially 2 murders." "Yes." "You have evidence?" "A dead man's testimony, a child's scars, and a kerosene tin sitting in my yard." Rudd rode back with her. At the ranch, Lark saw the marshal coming and stepped behind Cade, one small hand gripping the back of his shirt. Not hiding from the law, hiding behind her uncle. The wall had cracked. One person had been let inside. Then Lark reached into a carpet bag and pulled out a folded paper. "Mama gave me this before she died. She said find someone honest." Nettie's letter, shaking handwriting, dated the week before fever took her. It described Poke's visits after Josiah's death, his threats, his pressure to sign the deed over. And it described the stampede, a gunshot from the ridge that spooked Josiah's horse, a shot no one else reported because no one else survived. 7 final words. "If something happens to me, Blame Polk. Rudd folded both letters into his coat and rode for town at a gallop. Ezra Polk was arrested the next morning over breakfast at the hotel. Fork in hand, warrants on the table, irons on his wrists. His cousin Drusilla's orphanage was raided within the week. 14 children removed. Bruises documented on 11. Locks on cellar doors, locks on pantries. A horror dressed in respectability. Finally dragged into the light. That night, after the warrants were served and the marshals had gone and the world had quieted down to crickets and cold stars, Sable sat on the porch and cried. Not from relief. From the hollow underneath it, the space shaped exactly like a copper-haired girl she hadn't seen in 3 years. Cade came out and sat beside her. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just reached over and took her hand. His palm was rough and warm and scarred from the fire. Hers was small and calloused from years of other people's laundry. They sat like that until the stars moved, saying nothing, holding on. And somewhere in that silence, the arrangement became something else, something neither of them had names for yet, but both of them recognized. The feeling of not being alone anymore, the terrifying, precious weight of it. The territorial court voided every guardianship Polk had ever signed. 12 children returned to families, 6 ranches restored. And on a cold November morning, a new judge stamped the papers that made Lark's custody permanent. Cade and Sable Hollister, legal guardians, full authority, no review required. Lark was theirs. It should have felt like victory. It should have felt like enough. But that evening, Sable stood at the kitchen window, watching Cade teach Lark to brush down the horse, the girl's small hand following his scarred one along the animal's flank. Both of them quiet in that way they'd developed, a silence that had stopped being empty and started being full, and she pressed the locket against her chest until the metal bit into her skin. Mercy, 8 years old now. She'd be taller. She might have lost the freckles. She probably didn't remember Sable's voice anymore. I need to tell you something. She said it that night, sitting beside Cade on the porch, while frost crept across the valley, and their breath turned to smoke. The real reason I married you wasn't charity. It wasn't bravery. When you told me a child was being taken by a man with power, I heard my own story playing back to me like a song I couldn't stop. My daughter Mercy was taken the same way. Not by a magistrate, by a judge who decided 6 blocks of weakness mattered more than 1,000 days of love. She opened the locket and showed him the copper curl, thin as spider silk, catching the lamplight. She's 8 now. I don't know what color her eyes turned. I don't know if she sleeps through the night or still needs the lamp left burning. I carry this hair, and I talk to her in my head, and I pretend it's enough. But it's not. It will never be enough. Cade was quiet the way storms are quiet before they break. Not empty, but loaded. Then he spoke, and the words he chose were the ones that made Sable understand, finally and completely, that this man was not what the territory said he was. Then we go get her. Cade, we ride to St. Louis. We bring the custody papers. We bring Josiah's case, the newspaper articles, everything that proves what you did here. You stood in front of a corrupt magistrate and didn't flinch. You protected a child that wasn't yours with your bare hands. You helped bring down a man who'd been stealing children for a decade. Any judge who looks at that record and still calls you unfit isn't a judge. He's a fool. His hand found hers in the dark. I burned a woman's home, and her husband still trusted me with his daughter. Courts can be wrong, Sable. People can change. Your girl deserves to know who her mother became. A floorboard creaked behind them. Lark stood in the doorway, nightgown pooling on the cold wood, eyes wide and stripped of every wall she'd built in 6 years of surviving. You have a daughter? She asked. Yes. And someone took her from you? Like they tried to take me? Yes. Lark crossed the porch without a pause, without hesitation, without any of the careful distance she'd kept, since the day she stepped off the train. She climbed into Sable's lap, something she had never done, not once, not even close, and pressed her face into the curve of Sable's neck. Her small body shook. "Then we have to go get her," she whispered. "Nobody should take somebody's little girl." Sable's arms closed around her, and she looked at Cade over the top of Lark's dark hair, and he looked back, and in that amber porch light she saw it clear as scripture. This man loved her. Not the arrangement, not the convenience. Her. The woman who ironed other people's shirts and carried a locket full of grief and had once walked 6 blocks in the wrong direction before turning around. He loved all of it. And she loved him back. She just hadn't been brave enough to call it that until now. They went to St. Louis in the spring, all 3 of them, riding the same rail line that had brought Lark west. That fight took weeks, lawyers and courtrooms and documents, and a judge who frowned at the file and then looked up at Sable and said, "Tell me what happened after you came back that night." She told him everything. She didn't flinch. On a bright afternoon in June, the 4 o'clock train pulled into Vale Creek Station, with the whistle screaming and dust rising gold against the late sun. Sable stepped onto the platform, holding the hand of a copper-haired girl with freckles scattered across her nose like tiny stars. Cade was waiting with Lark on his shoulders. Lark had spent 3 days painting a sign in crooked, stubborn, beautiful letters. "Welcome home, Mercy." The 2 girls looked at each other across that platform, Lark, who had lost everything and survived, Mercy, who'd been kept from her mother and endured. And something passed between them that no adult could name. Lark reached down from Cade's shoulders and held out her hand. Mercy took it. And Sable stood in the exact spot where her whole life had pivoted, one daughter in her arms and one on her husband's shoulders, and understood at last that the question she'd asked Cade that night in the laundry, "What did you do to lose her?" had never really been about him. It was the question she'd been whispering to herself for 3 years. And the answer turned out to be the same for all of them. They hadn't lost people because they were broken. They'd lost them because the world breaks what it doesn't understand. And the only answer to that kind of breaking was to build something the world couldn't take. Not a ranch, not a certificate, a family, the kind you choose with your whole scarred heart, knowing exactly what it costs and deciding it's worth every single mark.